Welcome back to Deano's Garage. This isn't an episode of the YZF750R, but in fact it is about the FZs1000, the Yamaha 1000 Fazer. This is a bike I've had now for, I think sort of best part of 9 months or so. I got it last year, end of last year, and to be honest, it's a perfect machine. I had a few sort of read-ups on this bike and some of the old reviews, obviously, you know, going back now to sort of early 2000.
Yamaha's new FZs1000cc Fazer. It's a machine with all the looks of a street bike, with this half fairing and these high handlebars, but it's got all the power of an R1, and it's fantastic. Yes, it really is fantastic. It's very powerful, it's very fast, it's manoeuvrable, agile, and it looks mean.
Well, it's an all-rounder really. It's what modern day bikes are arguably sort of designed around, this kind of machine. More of an upright riding position, speed when you need it, grunt when you need it, and it is exactly what it says on the can. With the alarm, did give me quite a bit of trouble. That, I think, was a standard Gemel alarm fitted to this bike. That began to shut down, and because it's an immobiliser, it began to shut down the ignition. So I basically rigged the bike of that Gemel immobilising system. So, having established the alarm is no good, obviously what I needed to do then was establish where the alarm was wired into the system and how I could then begin to sort of take that out of the system. So here we have the Haynes manual for the FZs1000. My bike's a 2002, and obviously you can see from this wiring diagram that it suits that model. Now up here is the alarm fitted. Now annoyingly, on this alarm, and as per this wiring diagram, every wire is black for some bizarre reason. I guess it's part of anti-theft. It's part of someone getting under your seat and not being able to figure out which wire does exactly which, and then just cut those wires and sort of hot wire your motorbike in effect. I guess that's the logic between every wire being black. But what it does do is make it tricky to identify which wires are running to what. So you kind of got to, you know, go through each wire and detect that and see where they're physically running to, which is why I pulled a lot of the electrical tape off to try and do so. But basically, when you look at this alarm system, you can see that part of it runs to kill switches, part of it runs to the relay assembly, and then from the relay assembly it runs to the ignition control system. So I know it's part of the ignition, so if it does fail, then obviously we're not going to get a start. Now what I did get to the point of doing yesterday was looking at this start switch. I got to a point where I knew I had power, I knew I had everything else, but the start switch was not working, so I had no power to the start switch. So when you look at this diagram, you can see that this black wire runs down from the start switch and comes out of the alarm system. So if you want to do away with the alarm system, you have to find an alternative means of getting the power to the start switch. So luckily in this manual it shows FZs1000 US models. I guess they don't have thieves in America. No one steals any motorbikes in America, so therefore they don't need alarms. What a perfect utopian world it must be there. Anyway, as you can see, no alarm fitted. So as there's no alarm fitted, you can then look across and say, right, okay, so here we have the start switch. And then this blue wire from the start switch runs across and through and goes to the relay. So what I did is basically went, right, okay, if that's how it is without the alarm system, I took a wire here, as you can see, found the corresponding wire in that relay, and basically hot wired, for want of a better term, from here up to here, having identified obviously that this wire is the wire on the terminal block that basically goes to the kill switch, and this wire is the correct one as per the wiring diagram we just seen. Now, hey presto, that worked. I then got the start switch to operate, but still the bike at this moment in time doesn't start. Now my theory is, and I'm hoping this theory is correct, that also within this wiring diagram we have another wire, ignition wire, that runs to here from the alarm. So what I have to basically do is establish that wire and also in effect hot wire that, so we are eliminating the alarm system. But again, the way to do that and to figure that out is to obviously use this wiring diagram as if there was no alarm, and then I'll be able to identify that wire. So I'm going to try and figure that out now, and when I do figure it out I'll come back to you guys and include you in my findings and how I've overcome the alarm system and basically the overriding of the ignition system. So if you ever get this kind of problem, hopefully you'll be able to sort of base this looking logically at wiring diagrams and being able to sort of look at something with and without, and then figure out by logic and by looking at the actual wiring on your bike how to overcome these problems. So stay with me and we'll see whether that wire that I bypass will fix the problem and the bike will start. Back in a bit. Right, now before I start to actually do the bypassing on the wires, I just want to talk you through the logic of the wiring diagram and how the US one differs from the one with the alarm. So what I'm looking at basically is, here we can see the ignition main switch. There's this wire here which is a blue and yellow wire, the blue and black wire, not the blue and yellow, sorry, the blue and black. This blue and black wire, so it starts off blue and black, gets a connector, and then becomes a black wire that runs back to the alarm. Now the reason I'm looking at this particular wire is because when we come back to here, we can see that there's a black wire that runs up and goes up here, all the way across, all the way through here, back to the alarm. So that is one of the alarm wires that runs into the ignition system, and obviously what we want to do is eliminate the alarm system from the ignition system. So we can see that that wire runs back to the ignition system and then runs out to the ignition switch, main switch. So what I need to do is figure out how to eliminate that. So when we go to the US model here, we can see here there is the same blue-black wire that doesn't run from the alarm system or to the alarm system. It runs straight down here to here to here, lo and behold, into the ignition system, and it shows it also in the same position as the black wire that runs from the alarm. So I'm kind of hoping and applying logic here that that wire that runs into the ignition system and runs back to that main switch, and is also identified by the same colour being blue and black, is the same wiring that we need to eliminate from the alarm system. So establishing that it's the blue and black wire that runs straight to the ignition system, what we then need to do is physically go to my wiring loom, identify the wire, and then basically bypass it so we're connected directly from the main ignition switch back into the ignition. And that's what I need to do now and physically show you that. But I just wanted to run through the logic of how I'm working and what I'm applying here by using wiring diagrams. Stay with me and hopefully we'll have the bike up and running in a little bit. Well, I was going to get on and just try and do this whole bypassing thing, but then I realised that not everyone necessarily understands wiring diagrams and what to look for, etc. So I thought what I better do is, before I just crack on with things, is actually explain what to look out for and how to identify. So just to talk you through, so when you see this kind of thing on a Haynes manual wiring diagram, now I can't speak for every type of wiring diagram, but in a Haynes manual, this identifies a block. For instance, something like this. Now, as you can see, these aren't color coded. It would be nice for you guys if they were color coded, but basically it tells you that this is a connector block. So you can see here, for instance, we have a connector block, and it shows blue and yellow wire going into blue and yellow, blue and black going into black. I don't know if you can make out the blue and black. You can just see the blue with dots. So that basically tells you you're not looking for a blue wire with dots, by the way. You're looking for a blue wire with a black stripe running into black. And then just to make sure you've got the right one, you've then got brown with red. So when we look at, let's just get that manual out the way. So when we are looking at these blocks, first thing I see is right, so if you look here, you can see that we have our blue and yellow wire running into blue and yellow this side, and then we have what we're looking for, which is a black wire, but on the other side of the connector it was shown as blue and black. So you can just make out here that it is a blue wire with a black stripe. You could argue it's a black wire with a blue stripe, but in the manual it's identified as blue with black dots, so that is a blue wire with a black stripe running into this black wire. So this black wire is running from the alarm. We know that's running from the alarm, and let's just remind ourselves why we know that, because when we go back to this diagram, and forgive me for the focus, but when we go back to this diagram, so we have blue and black, it runs the black wire from the alarm system to that block. Now obviously on a wiring diagram you look at this and think, oh hang on, that's a short wire. That has nothing to do with the length of wires or anything. It's the simplicity of drawing a wiring diagram. So these wires do not in any way denote the positioning of your electrical components and the length of the wires running from those electrical components. This is drawn to make it as simple as possible and fit on these two pages. So you're purely looking at coloration of wires and where they physically run. So blue and black runs to black, runs to the alarm. So we want to basically pick up this wire and we want to in effect bypass it. So what I could do is in effect trace this wire all the way back to the alarm system, cut it, or find this connecting block. In this case actually, although these are connecting blocks, in the case of our alarm system they aren't connecting blocks, they're actually sort of hardwired in. I'll show you just kind of what it looks like I don't know if you can see that, like that. It looks like somebody's done it themselves. Now I don't think they have. I think this was done originally by Yamaha. It looks pretty rough for my reckoning, so whether someone's redone the taping I don't know. But basically what we can do is trace this wire physically and then cut the wire a little way back from the connection. Never cut wires close to connecting blocks. If you cut it too close and you've done something wrong, you won't be able to strip that wire and reconnect because you've got it too close. So always cut back bit, so you then got that wire to connect to, and then what we want to do is connect that wire over to here, picking up the black wire that we have here that runs back up to the relay assembly. So we're basically bypassing the alarm and connecting from the ignition switch through into the ignition system, but we'll come back to that, like I say, when I physically do that, so I can show you what I've done. But that's the logic of what I'm doing, and that's how you identify the actual wires that you need to cut, and then apply that obviously to the wiring diagram itself. Right, so what I've done is I've basically found that wire that runs from the main switch, which would normally then run back to the alarm, and then out of the alarm back in to the ignition system. So we've bypassed that in effect by taking the wire which is here. So this no longer runs to the alarm, it runs from the main switch, which was that blue and black wire, running to the black wire that ran to the alarm, and then this now doesn't run to the alarm, it runs to the ignition system, as I showed you on the US model without the alarm picking up that wire in effect. So fingers crossed, we now need to see whether my theory works and the bike starts. So let's have a go with that and see what happens. So here goes, fingers crossed. So that's brilliant news. Now, one of the things I did notice when I rode this bike was sometimes it had a starting issue, and I never really knew why. I thought it was something to do with carburation. I had balanced the carbs. Also, I changed the spark plugs to the sort of single firing point, not like the sort of older style plugs, hoping that that would sort of cure the starting issue. Sometimes it started okay, sometimes I found that it needed a little bit of throttle, but I think that was coincidence. And oddly enough, on the Sunday, last Sunday that I rode this, the bike started first time when I first went out on the bike, but when we got to our destination and I started the bike, or went to start the bike, it wouldn't start, and it needed what I thought was a little bit of throttle. But I think that was the point, or it had been the alarm breaking down with the ignition system and slowly causing this issue, starting issue. Let's just test that again, but in theory that's probably the first time it's started straight away, both times on the button. So I think I've got rid of the alarm system, and I've probably cured the starting issue as well. So in theory we've now got a perfect bike in the sense that it always ran very well, and it ran better when I balanced the carbs. But now I've got a bike that starts on the button every time as well as, so I'm overjoyed. I'm overjoyed, and hopefully my sort of explanation of how I overcome and fix this problem will help some of you guys in, if you haven't had it already, just sort of confidence really in reading wiring diagrams. You can be overwhelmed by all of this. You can sort of see it as a spaghetti of various colours of wire that you wouldn't even begin to understand, but you should never really look at wiring as that. Once you have a wiring diagram, you can see by the colours of each wire where that runs to, what it's for, what it does, and then really begin to understand how you can possibly overcome problems. Now obviously with multimeters you can start checking resistance of failing you know, different parts of the bike, where there should be a certain voltage or there should be a certain resistance. You know, you can do that with a multimeter. But I first initially thought that I had a problem with the relay, possibly. I also thought and nearly purchased a new ignition box, or a second-hand ignition box. I pretty much had bought it on eBay and then had second thoughts and thought, let's just tackle this alarm thing first, then go back to see whether this is a problem. And so by doing that and not using any multimeter, just applying logic via that wiring diagram, I've been able to overcome this problem. Yes, I haven't got an alarm system or an immobilising system with this bike now, but then, like I explained, I never had, I never used it. I always thought it was problematic, and certainly when I pressed the fob it never did anything. So for me that's not an issue, and all too often, especially with older second-hand bikes, people have messed around with or changed, or I've bought quite a few bikes now, as you well know from some of my videos, and often people say, oh, I don't use the alarm, never use the alarm's causing problems, or the alarm's been cut and disconnected, because in a lot of ways they're more trouble than they're actually worth. And as this proves, you know, I'm happily going along the road last week, having had a nice ride for some, I don't know, 70 odd miles, and then the bike cuts out on me like that, and I'm left in the rain waiting for several hours for the RAC to come out. And this is something that he couldn't fix, and to be honest, he wouldn't have been able to have fixed unless he had that wiring diagram, some wire like I had to bypass the system, and a full understanding of the various sort of components, if you like, running from here to there and where the wires were. He wouldn't have been able to have done that roadside, and if he had done it, it would have taken him some time. So yeah, alarms, immobilisers, arguably more trouble than they're worth. Better to have a motorcycle than not have one if it's stolen because you didn't have an alarm system, of course. But that's another theory. You know, you can use locks, disc locks, and other means to stop people from stealing your bike. But like I say, don't be afraid of wiring. Don't be afraid of wiring diagrams. Get used to looking at them. Get used to the understanding of them, and really you'll see them in a more simplistic way, and how you can try and overcome problems like I have. So thanks for watching Deano's Garage, and this has been a successful story of a problem that I thought initially, well, I was going to have a lot of troubles with. But again, stay tuned, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll learn along the way just like I have today.